I have held this precious hand for a lifetime of ministry, but more than that, friendship. It's my honor to welcome Dr. Reverend Andrea Asebedo to share her heart with you, and I'm pleased that you're all here to open your hearts and hear some wisdom that will change you forevermore.
No pressure.
No pressure.
So I promised that I would not reminisce terribly much to myself. Everybody else was like, go ahead, go ahead. But you know, on the 12-hour drive from Bellingham to Reading, I listened to a lot of podcasts. And I was sitting there realizing that there was a story out of one of them that was so appropriate as a reminiscent kind of thing for now. And I was listening to Jack Kornfield, who's one of my favorite teachers. He's probably one of the most famous of the Western Buddhist teachers in the United States. And he was talking about going to China for a convention of Buddhist teachers and leaders in thought from all around the world. And in China, as you know, during the Cultural Revolution, many of the profound Chinese Buddhist masters were executed and their temples were burned. And so Jack was in conversation with the current Zen master of a temple, and this young man he wasn't that young, but he was in his 40s. And his teacher was one of the most famous of the teachers that had been executed. I don't remember his name. It's very long and Chinese sounding. And so they were walking, and Jack's teacher is Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Chah was taught by the most famous Thai monk, enlightened master in that part of the world. I don't remember his name either. It was Ajahn something. And so the Chinese monk, the 40-something-year-old monk, was saying to Jack, who's in his 70s now, he said, I think about my teacher, and I think about the awesome responsibility that I have to carry the teachings that he gave me forward into this time with this generation of practitioners. And I think to myself, me? I still get angry. And he looked at Jack and he said, do you get angry? And Jack said, oh yeah, I get angry. And he said, well, do you feel this way? And he said, Jack said, of course I do. And let me tell you that in my long practice, I have seen my master enraged. I have seen the Dalai Lama yell at people. I've seen Thich Nhat Hanh be so angry that he couldn't speak. He said, what's important is that we continue the practice and understand that, yes, it is us this time, but the teachings are eternal. And we, for a brief moment, have the honor and the privilege to continue to work deeply within ourselves to be the best vehicle for those teachings that we can be. And I want to tell you, after last night, you have some of the best vehicles now for the teaching that I passed on in Mary and Sue and all the other ministers that I've had the privilege of working with. And so I'm delighted you're here, and I hope you'll come and support these teachers as they hold the teaching of the science of mind and bring that light into the world now. It's fun to be here. I mean, the bell, actually, I don't know if you know about the bell, but James and I were escaping the heat with our children, and we went to Washington. to the San Juan Islands, and we happened to stop near Bellingham. And we went into a shop. The children were hungry, so there was an ice cream shop, and they were ordering ice cream, and we went next door, and this bell was for sale. And so even though we weren't making a whole lot of money, we had all these little kids in braces, we bought the bell. And we came back with the bell in the back seat. I think it was the Colt Vista. The children had to kind of make room around them for the bell, but we didn't have the stand. And so we came back and we said, we bought this bell for us. Want to help us buy the stand? And in one day we raised, whatever it was, hundreds of dollars to have the stand shipped down from Washington so that we could have the bell. The window behind me, my father, when my mother died, commissioned, and a local Reading artist using very beautiful glass from Austria designed the window, because behind this sanctuary there used to be a grove of oaks. And right before my mother died, there was a horrible snowstorm, literally days before she died. And it knocked the oak trees down behind here that my father and mother had come to really love, because the birds were nesting in those trees and the squirrels were running back and forth and leaping from tree to tree. And probably because they were my parents, that was more interesting than what I was saying. So a little bit of history, and now I'll go on to my talk, which is, my religion is ... You know what the Dalai Lama says, my religion is kindness, right? But have you ever thought about what yours is? And what I mean by that is something that Mary Oliver in her poetry handbook says. She says, attention is the beginning of devotion. And so I want to talk today about what you're paying attention to, what I'm paying attention to, because it's much more important than maybe we've realized. Because in the attention that we lavish on the various things of our life lies our devotion. And sometimes that's misplaced. See, in the Science of Mind teachings, one of my favorite woo-woo parts of the Science of Mind, there aren't very many, they sort of edited those all out from the 1929 version. But there's one section in the Science of Mind textbook, maybe you know it, where Ernest Holmes is talking about thought atmosphere. And he's talking about how every person, every business, every center, every city, every state, every country, and the world, they all have a particular and very specific thought atmosphere. And what that means is that we generate out of our deeply held ideas and beliefs an atmosphere that surrounds us, that precedes us into any room we walk into, that we live in, move in, and have our being in as individuals. Maybe you'll remember the comic strip Peanuts. Well, we're sort of like Pigpen. Hopefully not really, but he was always surrounded by a cloud of dust. No matter where he was, no matter how often he took a shower, he was surrounded by that cloud of dust, Pigpen. Well, we're kind of like that. Actually, we're totally like that. We're surrounded entirely by a thought atmosphere that's made up of these habituated thoughts that have become our devotions. And the question that I'm laying before us all, including myself, is, are those the thoughts you want to be generating your atmosphere? I've heard a lot in the last year about how there's a thought atmosphere in our country of division and hatred and racism and prejudice and all sorts of things. And I believe that's true. But it's not the eternal truth. It's simply a thought atmosphere that's being experienced right now. The same is true in any center that you walk into. If you came to Bellingham, the thought atmosphere of the Bellingham Center is slightly different than the Reading Center. You guys are older and more practiced. Bellingham's still learning. And yet the atmosphere is tangible. You can feel it, you can sort of sense it, And it affects how we are. When we encounter someone else, it affects how we relate to them. When we encounter a particular business, it affects whether we want to participate in that business or not. And so it's important to pay attention to this. And, there's a lot of really wonderful teachers and authors that speak to this. I was telling the earlier service that one of my favorite quotes from Annie Lamott. Have you read any of Annie Lamott's work? She's fantastic. She's hysterically funny, and mostly writes autobiographical kind of books about spirituality and life and being fat and things like that. And and so she said at one point in one of her books, I don't remember which one, she said, "My mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone." Thought atmosphere made up of that bad neighborhood mind. And so for me, it's really becomes important to pay attention to the deeply held beliefs and ideas that are generating that thought atmosphere, to really become aware, to practice a spiritual practice daily of watching what goes across the screen of our mind. What is it that we're saying to ourselves when we're not looking? Because I don't know about you, but I've been jumped by ideas and thoughts that I would no more want to believe than you, and they're in there, and they're sneaky. And when I'm not looking, they show up. And all of a sudden, because I've been practicing, I'll go, no, we're not doing that. We're not believing that idea, and I'll turn it. I'll offer a different perspective to my own mind so that it can begin to calm down and let go of false ideas that I've made real. You know that acronym, fear, false, evidence appearing real? Do you know where that starts? It starts in the mind, with the false ideas that we tell ourselves that we believe are true. We so wholeheartedly sometimes believe they're true that we can't even tell that they're not for a while, until you come to a place like this and your whole world becomes cracked open to possibilities and ideas that you never even considered. Did that happen to you when you came here? It sure happened to me. I found the Science of Mind teachings when I was 18, became a minister at, 20-something, and have been doing this work ever since. So Maya Angelou is very aware of this particular understanding. I've always felt that secretly she was a Science of Mind person. I have no idea if that's true. But she and Oprah Winfrey were very, very good friends. And so Oprah tells a story about her. Maybe you've heard it. But it's a great story about this whole thought atmosphere thing. So Maya threw a Christmas party at her house. And of course, you had to be someone kind of special to get invited to Maya Angelou's house for a Christmas party. So Oprah was there, and a whole bunch of other people were there. And Maya had a rule, wherever she was, that nothing negative would be said in her presence. I can remember Oprah talking about one time she had Maya on her show, and the cameraman, when they were getting ready for the set, dropped something or something happened, and he started to swear. And Maya turned and went, "You, out." And Oprah's like, Maya said, no. It's him or me. You can imagine what Oprah chose. So they're at this Christmas party. And apparently Maya Angelou's house was set up so that there's this huge living area. There was a couple steps up, and then there was this huge other kind of parlor area. So the party was on 2 levels. And, it was a Christmas party. Everybody's happy, everybody's cheerful, everybody's having a little to drink, maybe. Maybe that's why this happened, I don't know. But Maya and Oprah are up in the upper level, and all of a sudden, Maya freezes. And she's a big woman. She's like 6 feet. And she turns, and now everybody is following her, right? So everybody's like, uh-oh, uh-oh. And they've got their little drinks, and they're like, and she turned to this guy that was standing by the fireplace in the living room, who had just started to tell a dirty joke. And she did the same thing. She said, "You!" from across this huge expanse. "You!" And you know how it is when someone's being accused? All the people that were around him backed up. So he's standing there with his drink by the fireplace alone. She goes, "You! Out!" And he starts to argue with Maya Angelou. Really? He starts to argue. She goes, "Out now." And this, Oprah goes, "This was probably the most awkward moment of my entire life." And the guy sort of abashedly puts the drink down and kind of, I'm sorry, and leaves. And there's this sort of this stunned silence, because societally we don't do that, right? Have you ever had that happen at a party you went to? Thank God. Me either. But slowly, the party kind of got back and started talking, and pretty soon it's back to its cheerful self. But Oprah said to Maya later, she said, "I can't believe you did that." And Maya looked at her for a minute and said, "Oh, honey, I didn't want that stuff sticking to my couch cushions." Absolutely not. I wonder if we have the same clarity in our own mind. I wonder when a thought crosses our mind of hatred or jealousy or envy or even depression or anxiety, if we catch it, if we're like Maya, "You! Out!" so that the party can go on in a happier fashion. Are you like that? I'm not sure I am, but I'm working on it. And I think the reason that we don't sometimes call ourselves to account in this way is the same reason that at the party everyone sort of backed up. It's like, well, if I call myself on my own damaging thoughts, where will that leave me? What will I have to do? What thought will I replace that with? And sometimes we don't know. And I think the reason we don't know is because we've been trained to think. For years and years and years when we were younger, we were trained to think that what we think about and what we speak about are really not that important. They really don't matter that much. We were trained early that way. We were trained on the playground and in the classroom and in the home that our thoughts were not that important. Some of us were even given information that told us that not only were they not important, they were stupid, that we were stupid. And so with a mindset that begins to believe that what we're thinking and what we're saying is not important, well, of course we've got a thought atmosphere of division. Of course we've got a thought atmosphere in our country of confusion and perplexity everywhere, right? I mean, there's a lot of us wandering around not thinking that we're important, not thinking that what we think inside of our own mind actually has any effect on the world. But it does. It truly does. It does in such a powerful way that when we become aware of how critical what we're actually saying to ourselves is, when we really know that, not just as sort of an intellectual idea, but as a practice, we become increasingly aware of how horrifying it would be if we really allowed those nasty thoughts of ours in that bad neighborhood of the mind to take us away from the truth of who we are. And the truth of who we are, just in case you forgot, is we emanate from an abundant source of immeasurable power and light and love. We are that source's expression. We are sacred humans. And when we begin truly to believe that we are sacred, that there's a sacredness inside of us, oh, it may have been covered up by layers and layers of mistaken beliefs, but it's there. It's like, have you heard of that Buddha in Thailand that is about, now it's like about 1,000 years old. And there was a practice in Thailand. It's one of the largest clay Buddhas in the world. Well, it is the largest clay Buddha in that part of the world. I forget how tall, but it's huge, and it's made of clay. And so every, 100 years or so, the monks that were tending this Buddha would have to kind of patch it up because the clay would start to dry and it would start to crack. So they had a practice where they would come and they would, patch it all up. Well, in the 1960s, it was time. It had gotten a lot of cracks, and so the new monks knew that this was their task, that they were going to have to get on scaffolding and patch this whole thing. It's huge. And so one monk, he's getting ready to patch the bottom layer, and he has a flashlight. And 100 years ago, they didn't have flashlights in 1860. And so he decides that what he wants to do is kind of see how they made this clay Buddha. Is it sort of like one of those Easter rabbits that are hollow inside, or is it more like the really expensive kind that's thick? And so he takes his flashlight and he shines it into the crack, and he sees like a glint of gold. And he walks over and he shines it in another crack, and sure enough, there's another glint of gold. Well, long story short, sometime 800 years ago, in some war that they were having then, the monks of that time thought, and they were probably right, that the enemies would take that golden Buddha and melt it down to make weapons. So they covered it with clay. They were all killed. So no one knew. No one knew that that Buddha was actually solid gold. That's kind of like us. That's kind of like us. A long, long time ago, people stopped remembering that they're sacred, that they literally carry the light of spirit. Maybe you remember, and I'm remembering, but boy, it's taken a lot of spiritual practice on my part. How about you? Right? Just like that Buddha, we carry the gold of our own being into the world, and we can make a choice to have the thought atmosphere be like clay and cover that up so that no one can see the incredible preciousness of what we are and who we are. Or we can become curious, like that monk, and begin to shine the light inwardly on our thoughts and our ideas, on how we are believing ourselves into the world, and maybe begin to wash away the beliefs and ideas that have kept us from knowing our own priceless nature. And I'm happy to report to you that this understanding of the pricelessness of human life, the golden experience that you and I are in truth, is more and more coming into the world as a knowing. It's a thought atmosphere that's gaining traction. Thank God. How many millennia has it been? And one of the ways that we can support this thought idea to become more and more real is, first of all, we can know it about ourselves. And second of all, we can know it about others. And third of all, we can begin to practice in such a way that we no longer support with our thoughts and our words ideas that would deny the sacredness of life, ideas that would tarnish the pricelessness of another operating in this world of ours. It's a really great opportunity, and I'm going to give you a prayer about it toward the end of this talk. I also wanted to let you know that because Sue and Mary are incredible teachers, and they're busy, and I wanted to let you know something that they are also participating in, so they may not have told you. And that is that the science of mind philosophy that's been around for over 100 years now is evolving. It's changing. And I think it's important, especially for those of you who are younger, to know that. And I'll describe to you that progression, because it has to do with what we think about, we bring about. What we give our attention to is our devotion, as Mary Oliver says. So in the early days, because I'm old enough to have been around kind of in some of those early days, Ernest Holmes had only been dead about 10 years when I started studying the science of mind. And in those early days of the teaching, the focus and the emphasis of our spiritual teachings was all about using the law of cause and effect to manifest good stuff for yourself. You know, manifest a car. At that point, in that time, in that frame of reference, which was in the early 70s, it was all about having mink coats and Cadillacs and having lots of money and, you know, having a very thriving, prosperous life. Prosperity was kind of the focus. Having a very well inlaid experience was the focus of how to use the law of cause and effect. And it was great. I was 18. I was totally poor. And I used that law to manifest all kinds of good stuff for myself so that I could eat. That was a focus. Pay my rent. Have a Volkswagen bus. And live a good life. It was fabulous. I was 18 at that time. I didn't want a mink coat. I thought that was totally awful. I didn't want a Cadillac. I'd been driving in them my entire childhood. My parents were accountants. They thought that was a cool car. I hated them. I wanted a bus. But I used the law that way, and all of us at that time, I wager to say, were pretty much focused on that. And that continued for quite a while, learning to use the law of cause and effect to benefit self. And you know what? You know what I have to say about that? That's really important. If you don't have enough money, if you don't have enough food, if you don't have a place to live, it's really, really, really hard to shine the light of your own being into the world and feel effective. And so if you're one of the people that really needs to use the law in this way, you should. I did. You remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? The pyramid, and you have to have the basic levels first, and then you can have the emotional levels, and then you can, and right at the top of that pyramid is kind of your self-actualization needs, the kind of knowing you're a sacred human and being able to shine the light. But I bet, like me, no one ever told you about the other pyramid. The other pyramid sits on top of this first one, and it's inverted. And from the point of self-actualization, at the very tippy top of that pyramid of self-actualization, we move into service to the world, to the family, to the communities we share. We move in from that self-actualized point into a place of gifting back the gift of our own beingness. And what I love about the Science of Mind teachings is that more and more now, that's what we're about. More and more now we're using those teachings to gift the awareness of sacred humanness into the world, to support people in service, to find a way to bring the gift of this teaching into the world at large. And so a lot of our younger ministers, a lot of the people that are just coming out of ministry school, a lot of the ones that are, much younger than me, are very focused on issues that support the world thought atmosphere in being lifted. And I'm very excited about our teaching because of this. I'm very excited to be part of that progression of consciousness. And so wherever we are, we work from that platform of where we are to initiate ourselves into self-actualization so that we can move into serving the world, other people, animals, trees, the environment, Pick your favorite place of bringing the sacred golden preciousness of what you know to the world. That's where we are now as a movement. And so to close, what I wanted to tell you is, many of you know that I've been a student of Thich Nhat Hanh for a long time, over 20 years. And he's a Zen master. And many people thought, okay, well, she's a Buddhist now, she's not a science mind person. And actually, what I love about Buddhism is what I always loved about the science of mind. They're both philosophies, not religions, and they dovetail. And so I go to retreats on a fairly regular basis. Sometimes I get to go with Kelly here in the front row. And I was at a retreat one time, and at the end of the retreat, before Thich Nhat Hanh had his stroke, he would always be there, and he would answer questions. And so over the years, I get to hear basically the same questions. They're probably questions that you have too, being asked of this great illumined being. And the question that I'm going to tell you is the one that got asked probably the most often. How can we live in a world that has so much suffering? How can you smile when there is so much suffering in the world? Have you ever wondered about that yourself? Have you ever had a really hard day and you're like, I shouldn't even smile here because so many people are having such a hard time. Why should I be happy? Well, that's a whole nother talk, and maybe I'll come back sometime. But I'll tell you his answer. It really changed my prayer life. It went off. Let's go to here, Damon. There we go. So this is, I'm very loud. So this is what he said. He said, yes, we would all drown in the sea of suffering if it weren't for the bodhisattvas in every village, in every city, in the country, in different religious traditions, in caves and forests, in mountain ranges by the ocean, who are giving themselves in service to the world. We would all drown in that sea of suffering without those unnamed and unknown bodhisattvas, those who have dedicated themselves in service to bring the light to the world. And when I heard that, I cried. I still cry, because it's true. And I began to think about, he painted me a picture. I'm a storyteller, so I immediately went off on that. And I pictured, when I heard this, I had just gone to Costa Rica and I'd gotten to hike through the rainforest. And right about that time, the 13 grandmothers were becoming known. Do you know them? Nancy Purnell told me about them. And one of them was from the rainforest. A bodhisattva of the rainforest is what I thought. Bringing her healing knowledge out from the rainforest to give to the world. And I thought about the Tibetan monks who had been chased from their home. Oftentimes their home and many of their comrades had been killed or burned. And how in that horror, we had all been gifted with their understanding that had been hidden in the Tibetan hidden realm that none of us knew about before. And I thought about the doctor, Mark Ibsen, who used to come here, who takes his practice and goes to Afghanistan to treat children. And I thought about, and I thought about, and I thought about just the people in my experience that are gifting their lives, like so many of you do, in all the far-flung places of the world, because they love, because they are love. And so I brought a present for you. I'm going to ask Sue and Jill and anybody else who's volunteered to help. I brought you a present. And it has to do with this, because I truly believe that you too, in your very own way, are a bodhisattva in your world, in the circle of influence you have. And so I'll tell you a story about what you're going to receive. About a year ago, a whole bunch of ministers in Bellingham were having congregants that were very, very, very troubled by the hate speech that was happening And it didn't have to do with political parties, it was just rampant everywhere. And so we came together for the first time ever. In Bellingham, they had an interfaith gathering of ministers, and I got invited. It was a miracle. And we were trying to think of a way that we could support our community, Bellingham, in turning their thoughts to love. And so we were trying to come up with a catchy slogan for a bumper sticker. And I have to say, toot my own horn for a minute, this was what I came up with, and they liked it so well that we adopted it. And so all over Bellingham, you'll see a bumper sticker like the one you're going to get, so you guys can hand it out. And it's so heartening to me to see these bumper stickers and to get out of the car at the bank or the grocery store, or Trader Joe's, whatever, see the bumper sticker, go in, realize it's not from my community. It's someone I don't even know that has that bumper sticker on their car. And so you get the bumper sticker that says, "Let love be our legacy. We're all in this together." And I know bumper stickers, maybe you have a car you don't want to put this on. Tape it to the window, put it on your backpack, put it on your class book, put it somewhere where you see it. And the reason that's so important is because of the thought atmosphere I was talking about earlier. That when I see this out in the world, it reminds me of my true self. It reminds me of what I'm about. It reminds me that I'm not alone in this, that there are many, many, many bodhisattvas everywhere, people giving the gift of who they are in service to the world, in service to children, in service to the environment, in service to the government, in service everywhere. And that we're all in this together. We're not alone. We do matter. We really do. What we think about, what we speak about, and how we are in the world rescues untold millions from drowning in the sea of suffering. And so instead of a prayer, a regular treatment, I'm going to invite Judy to come up. And I'm going to tell you the prayer that I took from Thich Nhat Hanh's saying about the bodhisattvas in the far-flung regions of our world. And this is a prayer I say regularly, as well as my regular spiritual mind treatment. This is what I say. Please join me in this. Here and now, in this perfect moment, I accept and know that there is a divine love, an immeasurable intelligence at work within all things and all people. And as I know this, I turn my attention to those working in villages across our beautiful planet to bring love to the people of their village, to offer the gifts of their healing and their light so that the people of their village are lifted. And I know that they have whatever they need to do that. Do they need money? Money comes. Do they need support? Support comes in the most magical of ways. Do they need to know that we know they're there? They know. And I turn my attention now to the shamans and the priests and the rabbis and the ministers and the monks and the nuns of every tradition, graciously, day after day, bringing the light of wisdom that they carry to those who look to them in times of need and trouble. And I know for them that they are held in a love beyond measure, and that they too have anything and everything that they need to continue their work. Do they need support? Support comes. Do they need love? Love comes. Do they need money? Money is there for them. And I turn my attention to everyone, everywhere, who sits in prayer and meditation, who walks a labyrinth, who does Tai Chi or yoga. And I say to them, you too, my beloveds, are bringing the light of truth into the world. You too hold us in such love that we are lifted out of suffering and held, as I know you are held, by a vast, immeasurable love that has no limit and knows no limit. May your practice, whatever it is, be strong. May you remember, as I remember on a daily basis, that practice, that personal practice, saves the world again and again, over and over. And may you remember when you wake up and would rather have a cup of coffee than meditate, the pricelessness of the gift you give in sitting, in praying, in moving in sacred ways. May you know how important you truly are. And as we hold these beings in our hearts, knowing that they are supported by love in all that they do, knowing the priceless gift that they offer to all of us, though we do not know them, may I also know this truth for you, that in your very own circle, in your very own way, with the thoughts and the words that you speak and think, you too lift the world. And may you know how sacred and priceless that gift is to all of us. Thank you, sweet Spirit, for the love that holds us all. And so it is. Thank you.